Fred Sutherland. I'm from Golda Associates. I am the Vice President for Golda in Africa. We're a global company with 7 regions, and Africa is a key region for Golda because of the developing markets, etc. And Golda has really targeted the developing regions as an important place for them to play. We are kind of a medium-sized company in South Africa, very specialized in the environmental and engineering field. We're looking to grow, and we've had significant growth over the last 10 years. 2010, 2011 weren't particularly great for us, but I think we're back on stream, and we're on our way up. The guys that come out of varsity are extremely good in theory and good at theory. And I don't think, they're still well trained. I think there's a lot of debate and a lot of people say, it's not as good as when I went to varsity and all that kind of. I think that's nonsense to a large extent. I think the varsities are still turning out good guys, well trained. I think the problem is that it's always been a very theoretical education, and the theory is deep. So you spend a lot of time getting deep into second derivative calculations and all this kind of stuff, And when you get out into the business world, into consulting particularly, you have to do more than that. You have to know more than that. And I think the transition then from pure theory or pure engineering theory to being a business consultant in engineering is a very difficult process. And we don't, as an industry, we don't do enough about helping the guys get there. So one of the things Golda's been talking about specifically here in South Africa is creating a course for how to be a good consultant. And we've actually gone around the world trying to understand what do we have around the Golda world. And we found that there are some courses along those lines. So we want to bring that stuff back in and re-jig it for the African environment, and have guys like Andrew Brown, Tisha, Andre van Niekerk, standing up there, guys with like 30 years of being consultants and successful, and spending time coaching these youngsters as to what does it mean to be a good consultant. Because you can't just go and do a theoretical design and then deliver that to the client. If you haven't connected with the client, if you don't bring him into the process, he could well reject it. It might be the best design in the world, but if he rejects it, it's worth nothing because he's the client. So there's a lot about good client relationships that we don't teach at our varsities, and we need to get better at teaching the youngsters that. So the other big side for us is the commercial negotiations. You want a contract, that's fine. You've done a great job, but then typically at the start of that contract, you sit down with the client and to negotiate that final commercial terms. And our guys are pretty naive at that stage about what to do. So the other thing is, engineers by their nature are reserved people. They're introvert. They love to spend time working out the exact answer, and that doesn't often gel well with clients. So, and I'm not sure that you want to teach people to be extrovert or can teach them to be outgoing, but there's always a couple that will pick up on it. And there's some basic skills that you can teach people, and then they can do better at what we do. It's not so much for us in the industry. I think the trick about professional registration is for those outside the industry, to give them the confidence that what they're dealing with is now a guy or woman obviously, who knows what they are doing. They know how to deliver stuff, they know how to design, whatever it might be, and they do it to a standard of excellence that's acceptable to the industry. Because obviously this whole thing is run by the industry, for the industry, but ultimately the clients are the ones that should be more sensitive to it. So I think it should give them that confidence, and I think it's important for that reason. I think inside the industry themselves, is it good for the industry? I'm not sure. I think it puts quite a load on engineers today. So I'm talking about two different things now, of course.
Yeah.
There's your first registration, and then there's that continued thing. So I think first registration, sure. I would say it's important, and I think it should be continued. Whether or how they do it, whether that's absolutely the perfect way to do it, not sure, because I haven't done it for a long time. I got my registration a number of years ago, and they've changed it since. It's a lot stricter, I think, or not sure that it's stricter, but it's a lot more intense. So you have to have interviews and all that kind of thing. So I think it's changed quite a lot. But I think that first registration should be quite strict. Let's make sure we get the right people into the profession. We don't always think about it, but we deal in lives. We could, guys can have huge impact if they don't do things right. So I think it's important. The continued process of registering every number of years, I think that puts a hell of a load on the industry. I'm not sure that I see the value in that process going forward. I think that a lot of the guys find the appropriate courses to go on to get enough points to re-register, but whether those courses have given them any value in the job that they're doing, I'm not sure. So I think it's like anything. As soon as you put in an auditing or monitoring function, people within a very short time find ways to go around it and solve the problem. So I think if you have dedicated, strong engineers that want to be better, that's a much better solution than having some monitoring, auditing system in place that forces them to do something. Yeah, I'm actually in two minds about it, I must tell you. And I think one of the differences is that when we bring in young engineers, we don't pay them as badly as chartered accountants pay their young, newly graduated people. So I think they really, push those guys down and make them work for 5 years or whatever it takes them to register at a very lowly salary. I mean, I've got 3 nieces that have done it, and they get very little. And so, when you have an audit, like our company has an audit, you get 15 of these youngsters rocking up here and work like dogs. But it's what I would call real plain dog work. They go through stuff and they're ticking boxes. We bring in young engineers, we give them challenging stuff to do, and we expect them to perform. And they might be doing designs at a very early stage, and it's going to be checked by a PRNs, but they're working on real quality stuff, and we expect them to perform, and therefore we must pay them something better. So then you get to the point where the guy graduates or gets his PRNs, so the accountants get their registration, and they suddenly jump this huge amount. But they've really suffered for 5 years, in my opinion. So our guys get there, and they haven't suffered that hard for the 5 years, but now they relate themselves to that and say, I can't have this huge salary increase. Again, ultimately you should be wanting, if you're a good engineer, a dedicated engineer, maybe they exist, maybe they don't exist anymore, I don't know. You should be wanting to have that PRNs because it's a stamp from your colleagues saying, this guy has now made it, he's a good engineer. So I think if we bring our engineers in cheap and use them that way for 4 or 5 years, then it would be appropriate to give them an increase when they get their PRNs. But if you bring them in at the moment, what has to be competitive in our industry in South Africa, where there's a huge shortage, and you're paying them all that way up, and you're keeping them moving forward, then you can't pay that huge increase because, from that point, before the person has their PRNs to the point immediately afterwards, our clients give us no benefit from that guy. So it's very hard to now suddenly give him an increase because you can't charge him out it anymore. But if you say to them now, okay, you're going to get a huge salary increase or something, the guy will probably register for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, no, they would.
Because he wants to get the salary increase.
Yeah.
And, we really want the guys that are dedicated to it or want to excel at that part of the profession to go and register, because it makes sense. So it's a bit difficult, but I think the public and the industry at large expect people to be registered. Whether that attracts huge liability or not, they still expect it to be done. So, same as doctors and lawyers, I suppose. You expect to go into the doctor and see that certificate on the wall somewhere that says the Medical and Dental Council have accepted him. And if you don't see that, you might question what he tells you, But exactly, I think there's a huge problem. We don't have enough mentors. Certainly, if I just take gold as a microcosm of the industry in South Africa, or in Africa, we are desperately short of mentors. And look, because I'm the VP of Africa, I interact a lot with the rest of the world of gold, and they have the same problems. So it is a worldwide issue in our industry. So there's not enough mentors. I think the ones that we've got are pretty good, and they've got a lot to give, but they are often busy doing the work. They generally tend to be the top names in the business, so the clients want to see them and speak to them and interact with them. So they don't have enough time to do it. We have a huge shortage of engineers in South Africa, a huge shortage of those senior guys, and so that translates into a shortage of mentors. So our young guys, I think, are feeling starved to some extent, and I think it's probably contributing to why engineers leave the profession. So they don't feel that they're getting the attention or the direction or the guidance that they need. So to some extent, they're going to feel a little bit hanging out there. They're doing this big design and they're about to sign off on it, and it's the stadium at the Blue Bulls game, and might fall down if they don't do it right. And then they look for some guy to talk them through what should be done, and the guys are too busy. So, there's a huge responsibility there, and the guy will feel a bit exposed. So it's a big problem. I also don't think we know how to mentor properly. So we tend to expect that once a guy reaches a certain level of seniority, he'll somehow automatically know how to mentor. But it's not true. And a lot of those guys are, again, the same introverts that we spoke about earlier, and they don't know how to mentor. They can't build the relationship with the young guy. So just because you're a senior engineer doesn't mean you can mentor and build relationships. And of course, generations are changing significantly. So how do you relate to someone that, wants to spend 2 hours on his Facebook today? And he might make it all up at midnight, who knows? But our senior guys, and I can name a couple, will say to you, that's not acceptable. When he's in the office, he must do this and do that and do that. But the new generation does it differently. And so you've got to mentor around what you know as well, and what you can mentor on. And our guys tend to mentor, I think, or try to mentor on the whole picture. And it's not necessarily the right way to do it. I think the other thing we don't do is go outside the company to mentor enough. So everything has to be inside the company for some reason, I don't know. It's a mindset. And often we think it's line management. It's not line management. It shouldn't be line management. So we need to use that more. We've got a lot of... South Africa's had an extremely strong civil engineering industry for a number of years. But a lot of those guys are now retired or retiring or on the edge, etc. We should use those people to mentor. Why can't they mentor our juniors? And leave the active senior guys in the company to continue doing what they're doing, unless they have the time available or can make the time available, want to make the time available. It's actually a one thing, big time.
Yeah, that's
because if they don't want to do it, you can't force it.
Yeah.
We've tried different schemes in Golden. We've tried to create a mentor program and assign a person to a mentor and all this kind of thing. If they don't make that connection and the mentor doesn't want to do it and the young guy doesn't care, it just dies.
Yeah, no, you're going nowhere.
It's good. And it's a two-way street. That's the other thing we concluded very strongly in Golden. The mentee needs to want to be mentored, and the mentor needs to want to mentor. Otherwise, it doesn't work. the industry has this inherent nervousness about our IP, and we kind of think, we think that as Golder, we have this IP over here that if we put a wall around it, no one else will get close to it, which there's not much like that, I must say. There's very little that's that exclusive. And it lasts for a very short time. So if we come up with something, it only takes one job, and then the next consultant sees the client initiating that or hears about it, and then they know how to do it, because it's an idea. It's not rocket science. So I'm not sure why we don't try and do more as an industry, and get the industry more aligned with cross mentoring and sharing knowledge, etc. The other thing on the other generic blog or whatever it is out there that exchanging ideas, and I think people will ultimately still protect high level IP, and they won't put it on the blog, but they'll put the stuff that's normal knowledge on the blog, and the youngsters will still learn from it. And the other thing is that if you don't do it, they're going to go to Google anyway and Google it and get some answer from somewhere else that might be less valuable. Maybe the industry in South Africa should have a Wikipedia type of a thing, where there's some background knowledge. So someone's talking about a Gabian or something structure, and you go in and you Wikipedia it, or Sicipedia or whatever the hell, and you put in Gabian and you go and see, well, what is the definition of Gabian in Africa or in South Africa? And we've got a lot of guys. Well, I'm talking now very specifically about Golder's space. I mean, a lot of the civil guys are in the infrastructure space. But that's probably a good example. So, you have all these engineers trained in the infrastructure space, now they're going to the mining space. Words, terminology changes, the type of things change, and you just need to go somewhere to get more familiar with that. And it could be anywhere. And I think that would be a huge benefit to the whole BE side of the business and across Africa, the bigger Africa part of that.
Yeah.
That they would be able to get some quick familiarization. Well, it all depends what you know and what you don't know. But I think our experience, and we've been operating in Africa now for significantly, for the last 5 or 6 years. We've got offices in Ghana, in Botswana, in Congo, in Mozambique, in Guinea, and we're about to open up in Tanzania. And there's a lot of what you say that, depending what your mindset is, you probably don't really know the whole issue. And it's all kinds of issues. And again, this is where our people, our young guys coming up, need to be broader than just understanding how to design a bridge. Because doing business in Africa has issues that are far beyond that kind of thing. You have tax issues, you have withholding taxes, you have HR issues, you have codes of good practice, you have everything you can possibly, just the logistics. In Guinea now, we just won a job of millions of dollars worth of work, but we have to get 6 Toyota Land Cruisers into the country, in a week, and we can't do it. So it's great. You won this great project, and you costed it nicely and everything, but you actually can't get the basic vehicles. You can't buy them in country. So what do you do now? So I think that side of it, health and safety, huge issues. That our people are just not trained or orientated towards even understanding, never mind solving. But on the other side, on the positive side, I think there's a huge market there. Africa is really and truly opening up, regardless of all the stuff you see in the newspapers and all that. Africa is actually opening up. The big guys are in there doing it. So we've got the big mining companies, the big oil and gas companies, because they have now, I think, accepted that this is almost the last place that they're going to be able to get in and create space for themselves, etc. South America still has space, but there's a lot of big guys playing down there already. Canada, if you're going to go sit on the North Pole, there's still some space, but other than that, it's pretty tied up, and the guys have to buy each other to get space. Australia's, saturated. China, there's lots to be done, but it's so controlled by the Chinese, you can't get in there. So Africa is what's left, and there's huge opportunities. So the boys are running around, and the big guys have got lots of money to spend, and they want to get control of the assets, resources, and they want to exploit it. They have to often build towns, they have to build railway lines, they don't blink an eye. Not a big deal for them. They've got the money, they want in, they're gonna go in hard. Africa obviously is desperately short of people resources, but what we find is that in a lot of the countries there are good people, not enough, but there are good engineers in places like Ghana. We know Zimbabwe turned out a number of good engineers over the years. A lot of them don't sit in their home country anymore. But in Ghana, for instance, we're finding that the guys are sitting often in North America or Europe, and if we can just find them and tell them we have an existing growing office in Ghana, they want to come back. So they actually want to live in their home country, but they see no opportunity to do that. Once we give them that view that there's an opportunity, they're very happy to come back and live and work there. Guinea is the same. Places are still unstable. You've got to follow the right clients. We don't do work for African governments at the moment because we're just not comfortable that we're going to get paid or that there won't be some corruption in the background. Golda has a very strong view on that stuff. We won't take part in any bribery or any corruption or anything. So we won't work with certain organizations just because we believe there's a threat there. So we tend to follow the big global companies, and those guys, are happy to pay you in an appropriate rate in the appropriate place. But often they are also driven by making sure that you have local presence. And so a lot of these places we've created companies because by our own standards and by the client standards, it's the right thing to do. So in Ghana, we've got a lot of Ghanaians in the company now, and over time, they will take over and run the company in Ghana, and Mozambique, the same thing. But it takes time to build it up, and you've got all those issues we were talking about, and it's not easy. And there's a lot of school fees you have to pay. Unbelievable. So maybe there's other courses, we're talking about, maybe there's courses on doing business in Africa. Maybe there's courses on tax management in Africa. And you can go to the PwCs and they'll give you a course, and, after sitting there for 2 hours, you won't understand what the stuff they said.
Exactly.
Because they're giving the course for other accountants to understand. It doesn't always help us. There's a huge space, I think, there for giving that kind of information to other engineers by engineers that have worked out how to do it or whatever.
Yeah.
And why can't we share that information? Huh? We're so close with our information. We just cheat ourselves. I always had this idea. I always said, one day the South African engineering industry will get together like the lawyers do, and we'll drive things. We've never managed to do it, and I don't think we ever will now. The guys that are at varsity together certainly share salaries, and they talk to each other about promotions and whether they got increases for being a PRN and that kind of thing. That stuff moves around the industry very quickly. So we often hear that from young people that our salaries are out of line with somebody else's salaries or something. We don't actually know, but they know because they're willing to talk. When we came first to the industry, we wouldn't exchange our salary information with somebody else. I don't know why or not, but we didn't do it. You wouldn't go to your buddy that you studied with and say, I get 20,000, you get, he says, now I get 19. It just didn't happen. But these guys exchange it very quickly. So information is becoming much more transparent. Whether that's going to ultimately lead to a whole regeneration of the industry and the way of thinking, probably will.
Mm.
But which way it's going to go, it's hard to predict. But I mean, logically, if we had open information, there'd be less potential, I suppose, for someone to accuse you of collusion. And therefore, you could get around this, and maybe the industry could stand together better. Our problem is still that the stuff gets gazetted by people who set stupid rates. So you go to water fairs and they want to pay you 600 rand an hour for an Andre van Niekerk. Yeah, we can sell Andre at 2,000 rand more, depending where you are in the country or in Africa. So why would we put him on the water fair stuff? It just doesn't make sense. I would agree with a baseline, if the baseline had any sense to it. But the way they're doing it now is to make sure that there's a bottom that the client can push you down to.
Yeah.
Whereas it should be the minimum that you can negotiate up from.
Up from, yeah.
And it just doesn't happen that way. I think a lot of the guys are out there complaining a lot. And complaining about the next generation. And it's the wrong approach. We've got to stop complaining and start sorting it out. And it's not that we have to, I don't think we have to go into the varsities and change the courses. I don't think that's where the problem lies. The problem lies in that first 10 years. Because after 10 years, people tend to be committed to their profession, etc. The first 10 years is when we lose people. And we lose them because we don't give them the exciting vision of the industry that we had, that we enjoyed. And we don't give them that home, which comes through mentorship, I think. If you mentor them, they'll connect, they'll feel like there's a support structure around them, and they'll connect to the industry. At the moment, our industry, I think, it's got a pretty poor track record in that space. And we tend to leave the guys out there, and then they get attracted away by more snazzy stuff. We've got to become more snazzy,
Yeah.
more attractive, whatever that means.